Welcome to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast, where you can learn and be inspired by real-world examples of how technology is transforming businesses and reshaping industries in a language everyone can understand. Here is your host, Neil C. Hughes.
Welcome back to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast. Now, I record at the moment 35 interviews a month, and I'm always exploring ways to give you a different topic every day, because recording a daily tech podcast, I'm conscious things could quickly get very samey. So I am conscious, and I do try and keep things as fresh as we possibly can. And for those reasons alone, I think you'll love today's episode. Because have you ever stayed in an Airbnb property only to find that it's 11 p.m. and you want snacks, or you've forgotten your chapstick, sun cream, or headache tablets? Or have you ever thought, I love that painting, that mug, that clock, that apron, or anything in the property? Well, today I'm going to explore how shoppable Airbnb rentals are on the rise, as guests are seeking out better experiences and also the comforts from home. I don't want to reveal too much, so buckle up and hold on tight as I beam your ears all the way to California, because today Annie Sloan, who has recently launched a company called The Host, is going to be joining us on the podcast, and it's a digital commerce marketplace for short-term rentals. But she's going to share some insights today on the growing trend of shoppable Airbnbs and much more. So a massive warm welcome to the show. Can you tell the listeners a little about who you are and what you do?
Yeah. Hello, everybody. My name is Annie Sloan, and I am the CEO and co-founder of the HostCo, which is a travel industry and hospitality company that makes Airbnbs shoppable.
Wow. I mean, I'm really excited to find out more about that. But before we do, I always like to find out a little bit more about my guests and how they got where they are. So how did you get here? What's your origin story? Where did your passion for tech and travel come from? And how did those worlds collide for you?
Yeah, in a world. So I'll start with a little bit of background. So I'm a lifelong traveler. I've lived in many countries and spent much of my youth and 20s and 30s, I would say, traveling around the world. So that's where the travel element comes from. In terms of technology, so my co-founder and I actually worked at HGTV together as producer directors. Cool. Worked in TV and film. That was my initial passion. And I worked in films in India. I worked on projects in Africa and Europe. So it all kind of came together. And then I was living in the Bay Area in 2008. So I moved to the Bay Area in late 99. So I just initially, it's like a moth to a flame of people who are curious and love innovation and love technology in general, that you just want to know what's going on. And San Francisco at that time, I think I was 21 when I moved here. That was where everything, and still is to a degree, but where everything was happening in terms of electronic music, in terms of technology, in terms of curiosity. Even to the extent of things like Burning Man, right? Where it was just this creative nexus, right? And I went further and further into technology from television. I ended up so prior to the HostCo, I was a creative director at Facebook. Prior to that, I was a creative director at Twitter. I'm just a Bay Area eye roll. Like I work at every tech company. I worked at Google a little bit, Airbnb a little bit, but just went further and further. Media went from film. I mean, I was in film school and we were still shooting on film cameras, right?
Wow.
And that was in the late 90s, even there, we were just transferring. But media just became digital media, which just became technology, right? So that's how the whole path has gone.
Wow, what an incredibly cool story. What a cool resume you've got there too, man. Doesn't get no better than that, does it?
Well, yeah.
But that path, of course, led you to the HostCo, which is a retail solution designed to help hosts sell products in their short-term rental spaces. So I'm incredibly intrigued, but can you tell me the story behind that and the problems that you set out to solve?
Yeah, definitely. So my co-founder, Michael Hubbard, after working in television at HGTV, he left and he started a real estate company where he would buy distressed properties, flip them, because that's what we did at HGTV, right? We can flip houses in a week, furnish them and sell them as ready-to-go vacation rentals. So you buy a house from him, literally the next day you can put it on Airbnb. It's furnished, the Wi-Fi's on, etc. he also developed the property management company. So that means when he sold someone a house and they start renting it, he gets 25% of the income because he also owns the property management company. And he, over time, built this up. And I went further in technology, and he and I are the best of friends. We've traveled through Brazil, Argentina, India together. So we're also lifetime travelers together. And he came to me about 2 years ago and he said, we have all of these properties. All of the guests ask for the same thing. You can predict what your guests are going to ask for. They're going to say, where can I get beer at 2 a.m? Where can I get chapstick? Because I'm hiking in Death Valley and there's not a store for 30 miles around, right? They're going to say, oh, sorry, I lost your beach towels. They're going to say, do you have sunblock? Because I can't pack sunblock, right? So all of these things. And he said, how can we create a solution where people can simply buy the things they're looking for, which makes our lives better because it decreases the communication with all the property managers. And, time is money in that regard. And it also makes the guests a lot happier. And I said, I've been in this situation hundreds of times, as of you. I'm also an Airbnb host where I have said, where'd you get those mugs? Where'd you get those sheets? Right. And I said, let's create a digital solution where guests can purchase anything in the rental that you as the host wants to sell. And we can solve a bunch of their problems by pre-stocking items within the rental.
It's an absolute genius idea. And I just love what you're doing. And I suspect people listening all over the world, everything you just said will resonate with them because we've all been in that exact same situation. And are there any other insights into the growing trend around shoppable Airbnbs and the kind of things that's happening in that space? Because again, it's incredibly cool. And it's one of those ideas, I suppose, that everyone thinks, why didn't I think of that? Because
we like to say that anyone will pay $100 for an Advil and Gatorade the morning after they've gone, right? To someone, and me included. I have been there saying, if this Airbnb had Advil and Gatorade or an eye mask, right, I would pay $50 for that. It's the convenience of it, right? Of it being right there in the location. And the funny thing is, so we have about 14,000 hosts in our social community. And I will tell you, almost every one of them has said, oh, I thought of that idea a couple of years ago, right? Because it totally makes sense. And it solves so many pain points. It solves pain points for the host who wants to be able to provide a lot of those things and cannot. It solves the pain point of, I want to have a really distinctive listing. So I'm going to stock it with all these local makers and all this cool stuff. And that's going to make my listing stand out to other people. And then on the guest side, it's like infinite, right? How many times have you gotten into a place and been like, man, I just took a 12-hour flight or whatever it is. I just want some snacks, right? And the place is empty and you have no idea where the store is. If you can tell your host, which lots of hosts do now, hey, why don't you stock that pantry before I get there? I mean, it's great.
Yeah, I remember a trip I did to San Francisco once, and I was a little jet lagged, and I was wide awake at 3:10 in the morning, and I just wanted snacks. I wanted snacks more than anything, but of course there's nowhere open at that time. But I'm curious, what products and services are most in demand? I mean, you've mentioned a few already, but are there any others that spring to mind?
Oh, yeah. Okay, so we have a couple of categories. We have products that pretty much everyone needs.
Yeah.
And those are sunblock, phone chargers, snacks, sun hats, tote bags, things that either you can't pack with you because it's too big, or the things that you forgot. Anything to do with a hangover, always a big seller. Anything to do with trying to get enough sleep. Like, hey, your partner or your best friend, they're snoring super loud, earplugs, eye masks. So that's one category of things that pretty much anyone will buy. Also yoga mats. Very weird, but I know, right? Maybe I don't know. I don't know why, but interesting. And then we have the category of really creative things. Things like, I'm going to leave out a Polaroid camera and I'm going to sell the film if you're a host, which everybody wants to do, right? Or I have a bachelorette pad rental in Nashville. And if I leave a box of like colored wigs and funny glasses, every bachelorette party wants to buy it because it's great for the Instagram photos, right?
Yeah.
And then we have a third category, which we just launched, which is pre-orders. And that is going gangbusters. It's crazy. And it's also a lot larger numbers for the sales. So midweek cleaning is a really big one, right? Because you miss that from hotels. I personally, now I have 2 kids. I'll be like, I'm staying at a hotel because I want that cleaning, right? Like, I don't want to do it. So midweek cleaning, decorate for a birthday party is a big one. decorate for an event, like any sort of event, add fresh flowers before I arrive is another really big one. It's just an extra thing that, the hotel industry, they make a lot of money. They make money from the room. But what they say now is we don't make money from the room. We make money from the experience. Yeah. And they've always had this advantage of like, you can add room service, you can add a massage, you can add late checkout. And all of this money has been left on the table for the entire short-term rental industry.
And just listening to all the things you were listing there, it's almost like we need a digital version of the hierarchy of needs, don't we? Because I think it's completely changed from what it was 50 years ago. It's completely different now.
Oh my gosh. But if you need it, it's just like, and you probably know this in San Francisco, there's this joke about San Francisco that everyone's walking around in the same sweatshirt that says San Francisco Chinatown, because San Francisco, it's hot, cold, hot, cold. Yeah. And people come here and they think California. So they're buying these like sweatshirts that are almost falling apart that they spend $80 on. So if you have some nice fleece zip ups, if you have a hat, it's based on the needs first and foremost of like, oh shoot. Yeah.
So if we zoom out for a moment, what are the main benefits of digital retail for both the guests and the hosts at these Airbnb rentals? Because it seems to me that everybody wins really, right?
Yeah. There's a really surprising and interesting part of that. So clearly the guests win because they get what they need. And it's also a way to introduce them to retail without it being salesy. Like there's no price tags on anything, but people are always asking, where'd you get that painting? Can I buy that painting? Do you have any extra candles? Oh, I loved your apron. Right. So it's just giving the guests a more rich experience. On the host side, they're making money off of this, but they're also just giving their guests a better experience. And if you are a host, reviews are king. Reviews are everything. One bad review, you're going to drop in the algorithm, right? So the better review and the more detailed review you have, the better. Zooming out on a way more macro level, the majority of short-term rental hosts globally and in the US are female. So I think it's 58% in the States. In some other countries, it's 60%, 65%, someplace 70%. And the majority are over 40. The fastest growing demographic of hosts is women over 60.
Wow.
Yeah. So this is something that by providing retail in your space, you are having some upward financial mobility. And that sounds very grand, right? But when we take it out of the US, which is our goal, you take it to, rural Brazil, you take it to rural India, and someone might be renting a room for $20 a night. But if you're selling them also water bottle, your grandkids' handicrafts, and an extra tapestry that they loved, you're making $80 on the top of your $20 rental. So our focus is getting that money into the hands of particularly women and women over 60, which, you never think about when you think about the short-term rental market. But, a lot of people also think about it like, people who have short-term rentals are so wealthy. Well, like if you're that wealthy, you're not renting out your extra room if you're that wealthy, right? So it's kind of middle class in that area as well.
So the question I've got to ask on behalf of everyone listening and to bring everything to life is, how does it all work? So, for example, me coming to stop with you in San Francisco, or if I'm the owner of that Airbnb, how does it all get set up and how does that experience happen and pay for items, etc.? How does it all work?
Yeah. So let's say, Neil, you book a place in San Francisco.
Yeah.
Right after you book that, you will get a message. Generally you get a message, hey, thanks for booking. We can't wait to meet you. If you have any questions, let us know. In that message, there'll be a link. And if you need anything before you arrive or while you're here, we have a store. Right. That link goes to, it's a web link. You don't have to download anything, which is the best part. It's a web link. You open that web link. It'll say, Annie's apartment, San Francisco. It'll have a picture of the listing. It'll have the name of the listing. So it is, branded to exactly the place you're going. And in that store, you can see pre-order items. So you can pick that fresh flowers before I arrive, midweek cleaning. And then you'll also see all of the items in that listing that are for sale before you get there. Then again, about an hour after check-in, you'll get a message that says, hey, if you forgot anything or if you need anything, we have a store. And you'll again see all the items for sale in the store. And then you'll also see a few items from local vendors that we have curated. So our intention is to only work with very local vendors to provide things that are authentic to that area. So it's not going to be, your San Francisco hoodie, but it's going to be, here's local coffee on this block that everyone loves. Here's some artwork from a local underrepresented maker in your area. So you'll see a couple things in addition that you can purchase or have delivered.
I love that. And what about if you do see the apron, the clock on the wall, or the painting? How does that work? Is that not on the listing? Is you contact separately on that?
It is not. So hosts can tell us what people ask for. This is the great thing for hosts. They can say, man, everyone always asks about that mug or that apron. Yeah. And we can add that to their store for them. What we do is we contact that vendor and say, everyone loves this. Would you like to sell it in a store? And then we drop ship it. So if you love that apron or you love those mugs, you say, great, I love that apron. And if you add it to your cart, we'll ship it to you back home to wherever you live. There may be some, if you're in San Francisco and you're shipping it to the UK, I just will tell you, there probably will be some shipping charges. But yes.
And how much work's needed on the host side? So we might have a host listening thinking this is exactly what we need to improve our experience, offer those Instagram moments and all those other things. How much work do they need to do to get up and running with you guys? So
it is very simple. I'm sure you hear that all the time, but the more simple, the better. It takes about 3 minutes from start to finish to start your store. It's very similar to starting something like an eBay account or a Poshmark account. You say, here's my name, here's my email, here's the name of my store, here's a picture of my store. And then you can literally walk around your house or your listing and take photos of the things you want to sell. Oh, I want to sell that. Oh, I want to sell that. I want to sell that. And throughout that process, we also give suggestions because hosts often say, well, I don't know what to sell. And we'll say, here are the 10 things from Amazon that you should stock. Yeah. Right. And we can help you ship them. We can help curate the package for you. But we've left it up to the host to sell whatever it is legally that they want to sell in their space, because it really varies if you have a place at the beach and if you have a place at the mountains. Yeah. But hosts stock whatever they want. A really big component is that hosts generally do what we call a big stock. They'll do a stock every 6 months, and they'll put it in their stock closet, or they'll put it in the garage, or they'll put it in an out of the way space. Because what happens with a guest when you make a purchase, you don't have those items just laying around. When you make a purchase, you get a receipt that tells you the location of those items. So it's a theft prevention measure, but it also makes it so that you're not looking at 20 tubes of sunblock when you walk into a house.
Yeah, I was going to ask about that.
Yeah.
And I also read that you've raised an oversubscribed seed funding round of 1.85 million to help you scale the startup. But can you expand on that and your plans to scale, how that funding is going to help you?
The first part is getting our product out to more hosts and more hosts in the US. I think we're going to do US, Canada, and then North America, and then Europe probably after that. So that is the number one thing. We launched to the public February 7th. So we were in beta for a while. So we're brand new in that regard. The next thing is, with that initial raise, is starting to work with property management companies and property management systems, because they are also, there's your single host, but then there are other hosts who have a property management system and say, this sounds, I want this to be really simple, and hosts don't want to deal with it at all. But property managers will say, well, hey, that's great. We'll do it. And we'll send out that link to the store and completely automate it. So your guests are a lot happier, but you don't even have to think about it at all.
Wow, man. And do you get to hear any feedback stories? I know it's fairly early days, but have you had any stories from hosts or guests that you've got to hear about? Any anecdotes there?
A number of guests will say, wow, this saved my life. Yeah. And I think if a guest has said, wow, this saved my life, especially in a review, we've won, right? Here's a good example. My co-founder has a property in Death Valley, as I was saying earlier. And he, in one of his stores, he's like, I'm going to add chapstick. And I said, it's like 50-cent chapstick. He was selling it for $8. That's why I was ribbing him. I was like, $8 for chapstick. Every guest buys the chapstick. Brilliant. Because it's one of the driest places on earth, right? Yeah. So you were dying for chapstick. is a really big one of those. We're also starting to see like early check-in, late checkout. So hosts have added that to their store because it takes them an extra effort. They have to rearrange their cleaners, right? So on the host side, hosts have said, this has really helped us out because we feel like we are getting paid for the work we are doing rather than just starting to lose money, besides the initial check-in. I have a property in Joshua Tree, and it is this is going to sound funny. It's such a weird dopamine hit because I get every time someone buys something, you get an email that says, congratulations, you just made a sale, right?
Brilliant.
I will sell a $1 can of soda, and I get excited every single time. I'm like, yes, because it's so fun to see that people are using it and enjoying it.
Great. So many great stories there. What's next, though? Where do you go from here? Is there a grand vision for this?
Yeah, it definitely is. I think besides having guests say you saved our lives, getting to the point where we are working with more rural areas in other countries and having those hosts who are most likely older women say, hey, I was able to use this, even if it's $20 a week or $15 a week, say, I'm able to use this money for a really good reason and to help support my family or help buy an extra bicycle, something where we can add to that, those growing areas of tourism also that have just been decimated because of COVID, right? They're definitely coming back now, but that is the truth. I would love to say it's like ringing the NASDAQ bell, but it is much more so also because of my life experience and so much very rural travel, connecting with those hosts and making it sounds so grandiose, but just bringing them a bit of financial revenue.
Well, so much I've loved about chatting with you today. I've got so many ideas bouncing around my head now, which is always a good thing. And, But now we've reached another fun part of the podcast now. I always ask my guests to leave the listeners with a personal touch of inspiration by sharing a book that has inspired them or even a go-to song that just helps them get their head in the zone or is important to them. In your case, I would imagine all that travelling, you got a big pair of headphones, what your big song is when you're 30,000 feet in the air. But what you're going to leave us with today, and is there a story to accompany your choice?
Oh, gosh. Okay. So I would say I want to do both. So I'll make it really fast too. But let's say book, you'd think it was maybe a business book, but I'm going to say Be Here Now, the book by Baba Ram Das, which I think everyone should have it in their library because it is about, it's about being present. It's about truly experiencing your life, which I think as an entrepreneur, there's a lot of risk in that too. But just say, you know what, I'm a total hippy dippy, clearly, but just, saying, let's go on this ride, right? Let's go on this ride. And for me, I read that book in high school, and that was a big inspiration for me to travel. I ended up going to India for a year, traveling in India because of that book. And that was a huge part of my just inspiration for, continuing to be a curious traveler.
And I think even though it is a fairly old book, the message behind it is more important and more relevant now than ever before when most people are just staring down at a phone screen and not being present in the moment.
Yes, I very much agree. And then my song, which also is an old song, I guess I'm an old soul. It's not even that old, but Graceland by Paul Simon.
Yes. What a great song.
What a
great album song. As well.
Yeah, the whole album is incredible. I think that's on my Desert Island Top 10, which I do listen to over here in the States. That's what it's called, right? The podcast Top 10. That song, it embodies this spirit of creative travel, in obviously the way that the music is phrased, but he says, there's just some part of me that wanted to see Graceland. And it is just this kind of open road, but also just curious for the experience ahead and not quite understanding why you want to have that experience, which I think is so vital. Yeah,
no, 100% with you, and a great song. And I'm going to add that to our Spotify playlist. That's going to be playing in my head for the rest of the day too, and add the book to our Amazon wish list. But for anyone wanting to find out more information about the host, whether they're a guest, whether they're in charge of an Airbnb rental, what's the best starting point for everything? And equally to contact your team if they've have any questions.
Yes. So we're at www.thehost.co. That's our website. Join us on Instagram. We also have tons of content for hosts. We do a ton of host education around hosting at The Host Company. And then you can write us anytime at info@thehost.co with any question. Believe me, we've heard them all.
Absolutely love it. And there's so much about today's conversation. And what I've loved, and what I especially love is we've got listeners in 165 countries. And I would say that your story and all those products that you listed and the experiences that you've mentioned there will resonate with every single person. We've all been there, and the fact that you've gone out there and solved that problem with technology and improved experiences, especially in the hospitality industry and travel that has been decimated over the last few years. I think it's amazing what you're doing. I'm going to be looking at for a future trip to the US. I'm going to be trying to stay in one of these places. I'll probably spend a fortune. But thank you so much for sharing the story with me.
Wonderful. Thank you for having me on. This has been fantastic.
I cannot thank Annie enough for coming on and discussing the benefits of digital retail for both guests and hosts. But I'm curious, what products or services or items would you request in an Airbnb? Please share your items that you wish you'd had on a previous trip, that you wish you could have brought, and equally things that you noticed in the property that you wish you could have bought. Share them with me. And equally, if you're a host, will you be checking out this service? The way this podcast works is you now tell me everything that you liked or what it got you thinking about or things you didn't like about today's episode, and we'll keep this conversation going. So as always, email me, techblogwriter@outlook.com, Twitter, Instagram, LinkedIn @Neil C. Hughes. Keep those thoughts coming in your experiences and any questions or pictures to come on the show. But that's it for today. So a big thank you for listening, and until next time, don't be a stranger.
Thank you for listening to the Tech Talks Daily Podcast with Neil C. Hughes. Remember, technology works best when it brings people together.